This meeting is being recorded.
There we go. All right, so with no further ado, I would like to first welcome Brett Thatcher, who is a clinical social worker and psychotherapist located at Gould Farm in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. He has completed post-grad training in intersubjective psychotherapy and mentalization-based treatment, and his current research interests include contemporary psychoanalytic theory, queer and critical theory, queer mental health, and when not working, Brett is often found cooking a meal for friends, running or cycling through the hills, or reading his way through a pile of books. So Brett, thank you for joining us. And you have a presentation to share. Hopefully that will be able to be broadcast here.
Yep, should be coming up. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today. Okay. So what I'd like to do is first briefly introduce Gould Farm, which is the organization I work with, and then look at some basics to help recognize trauma symptoms when they show up, and then to build on that with talking about some ways that that awareness can shape and inform day-to-day trauma-informed work, and particularly how we do it here at Gould Farm. So Gould Farm was founded in 1913, and it's the first residential therapeutic community in the nation dedicated to helping adults with mental health and related challenges move toward recovery and independence through community living, meaningful work, and clinical care. We're located in the western part of Massachusetts. We're on a 700-acre working farm. All of our clients we call guests, and they live in 3 residences here at the farm. And then most of our staff also lives on the property in individual homes. And we all partake in community meals, activities. We take being part of this community really seriously and see it as really essential to what we do. So who comes to the farm for treatment? Adults, 18 or older, and folks have a variety of diagnoses: anxiety, bipolar disorder, major depression, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders, and lots of co-occurring substance use, personality disorders, and other mental health challenges. The bulk of folks' time in program here is spent in the supported therapeutic work program. Those programs are people work in the kitchen, we have a bakery at the farm, we have a garden that grows produce for the community and a CSA. We have a trail crew, housekeeping, maintenance. We're in the process of fundraising to rebuild our roadside cafe as well. And then we also have the more traditional therapy and groups here at the farm, which is really a place for folks to integrate their experiences in the work program and in the community as part of their healing and growth. So to begin thinking about trauma, I know trauma is just all over the place in our public discourse these days. And in some ways it's, at times it sort of loses its specificity. And so I want to think first about what's the difference between what makes something traumatic or stressful. And really, it's about the subjective experience of the person that something's happening to. One example you hear a lot is 2 people will be in a terrible car accident. One will come out of it with a post-traumatic stress disorder, and the other will come out of it without any long-lasting psychological impact. So what makes the difference? Typically, experiences of trauma are experienced as overwhelming. They're unexpected. The person is unable to prepare for what's about to happen. There's often feelings of powerlessness, powerlessness to stop what's happening, to prevent it, to escape. And a lot of times there's an experience of cruelty too, that something awful is being done to them with an intentionality. And then finally, it's also dependent on one's own individual biology, how one's nervous system operates, and one's history. We know that individuals who have been traumatized in the past are more likely to be traumatized by terrible events subsequently. There's a lot of talk too about distinguishing big T trauma and little t trauma. And I think for our purposes here, it's not important to do a lot of distinguishing that, but I do want to point out that trauma is not just simply about singular big terrible events, but also that chronic exposure to stressful events and situations can also lead to what we call complex trauma. For example, these might be repeated traumatic events like abuse, the stress of being a minority, exposure to domestic neighborhood violence, unresponsive or inadequate caregiving, onset of mental health struggles, which is something we observe often, etc. So the impact of trauma is largely body-based, automatic, and preconscious. And I say preconscious rather than unconscious because it's something that with some effort can be brought to consciousness pretty readily, usually, that we can see what's happening. And the memory of traumatic events or traumatic memory is stored in the more primitive, reflexive parts of the brain and throughout the body. So otherwise benign stimuli in the environment or even internally can trigger a cascade of reactions that will subvert our conscious ability to regulate those reactions. So our autonomic nervous systems that we don't have control over just sort of fire on all cylinders. Bessel van der Kolk, who's a big deal trauma researcher, I want to read a quote from him that I think really captures the experience of a trauma trigger. He says, maybe the most difficult part of having been traumatized is dealing with the triggers that reside inside. The trauma is a thing of the past, but your body keeps reacting as if you are still in imminent danger. These internal triggers transform your inner world into a minefield and come at any time. Your body keeps getting hijacked into feeling intolerable sensations and emotions. This makes you feel crazy. On some level, you realize that the danger is over, but your insides, the sensations that churn around in your body, keep warning you of impending doom. Trapped once again, you respond with terror, rage, and helplessness. So he named a number of symptoms in that, and I want to look just really briefly at the ways that the impact of trauma shows up in 6 different categories of symptoms. The first I'll call hyperarousal. This is involuntary and physiological. It's our nervous system activating. It's that racing heart, experience of fear, anxiety. It's a frequent or permanent sense of alertness for self-protection. It's that hypervigilance. So instead of our bodies doing what they're designed to do, which is looking for danger all the time, knowing that danger is possible, but instead it's convinced that we are in danger pretty constantly. Second one I'd call intrusion, which is this is the re-experience of the situation of victimization. So it's like being under attack from your own memory, that those traumatic memories are re-experienced in the present. The then is now. And sometimes this is fragmented. It doesn't come in wholesale. It can just be sort of isolated, vivid sensations or images without any verbal content or narrative. So it can be pretty disorganizing. Constriction or numbing. We often think about this category in terms of dissociation, which can be a pretty full experience, that sort of out-of-body, vacant, depersonalized experience, or it can be more partial, which is just sort of an interruption in our normal flow of consciousness or ability to access skills and different parts of ourselves that we normally can. Next is disconnection. And often trauma presents as a damaged attachment system. So individuals' capacity for intimacy or trust can be really impaired. And this can be an existential crisis. It can include a damaged self, this sense of oneself that's dominated by shame, guilt, or inferiority. I remember a professor of mine once talked about this as the conviction that oneself is unlovable. And then there's pathological grief, which simply is the inability to mourn what was lost in a healthy way because the memory or experience of the traumatic event is so characterized by terror that you can't even approach the memory to process it. And then finally, often trauma presents as in a damage to core beliefs. So those core beliefs would be something like a belief in a fair and just world, our need for others and attachment, a belief in the possibility of, or even the need for physical safety or positive identity or meaning and order in life. So pretty awful things to lose. So to begin shifting into thinking about what would be a trauma-informed approach, it really begins with safety. And to think about constructing a safe environment, I think it's important to think about our intention and approach. And I have on the screen a few values that I think are important to keep in mind that help scaffold an environment safely. So consistency and clarity. So to be clear and consistent about our expectations of others and what others can expect of us, being clear about our relationship and roles. So healthy boundaries are really important in our environment. Clinical boundaries are important. It's important to be clear that I'm here as a support person. Our relationship may be mutual, but it's going to be asymmetrical, that we are not going to be providing the same functions for one another. We also provide this through routines, through an expectable structure and schedule through the day or meetings. And also think about being able to say what you're going to do before you do something, and then be sure that you're going to do what you said you were going to do. Another principle is normalization. So we want to communicate to folks who are experiencing these trauma symptoms that they're not broken, they're not crazy. So to build an environment where we're accepted for ourselves and appreciated for what we can and do contribute. And then also to be clear about shared experiences that we, here at the farm, we often get to see each other mess up and acknowledge it and move on. And then finally, validation. Recovery involves practicing competencies in a milieu of encouragement, support, reinforcement, and protection. A couple of ways this shows up here at Gould Farm. Every week at community meeting, the longest part of the meeting is an opportunity to appreciate one another and share our observations of people's efforts and contributions. We also do a lot of work to be strength-based as well in various meetings and in our approach. And then in thinking about like when we recognize these symptoms that we've been talking about, what do we do? So when we recognize dysregulation happening, if we're going to intervene, we want to support people in regulating their nervous systems. We talk a lot about grounding, and I know this is also out in the cultural conversation as well. But grounding strategies are just simple strategies to mitigate emotional arousal. I think about it as being able to find a balance between the strength of our affect so that we're able to think and feel at the same time. And these can be mental or physical. Some examples of mental grounding. You can anchor your attention to the space you're in, observe textures, colors, shapes, smells. You can describe a room. You can look around and name all the blue things in a room or any color. And our work program provides a really helpful forum, and I imagine all of those of you on the call today too. The work really provides a lot of opportunities to be doing this, to focus on the task at hand, to notice the minutia of what it's like to participate in a task, texture, temperature, some physical grounding techniques, using cold or hot temperatures to get back into one's body, clench and release fists, slow down one's breathing, use strong smells. The farm is useful for that. And one of the ways to think about grounding too is to consider a contrary move. So if someone's aware that the source of their distress is internal, to do something that's grounding that focuses externally can be useful. And then if the source of someone's distress is external, to think about focusing on something internal. Other skills to think about, we do a lot of coaching of skills in the moment. And skills aren't just, skill development isn't just about acquiring a coping skill, but it's also about practicing, strengthening it, and then generalizing it to other different experiences. Basic affect regulation skills, just simply naming an emotion, being able to recognize it and sit with it, and use constructive distractions to allow that emotional arousal to decrease enough to be able to problem solve. And then simply naming and identifying one's experience. And this is, I want to be clear, not about inviting people to go into the story of their traumatization, but to recognize what's going on in the moment. What am I feeling? So like I say there, just simply identify and name. And then finally, I just want to point out that healing and working with trauma, the role of community and connection cannot be underestimated. And certainly trust and safety take time. Developing those is not a linear process, but for us all to keep in mind that recovery is relationship driven and benefits from response to the need for explanation, teaching, modeling, protection, reinforcement, containment, empathy, and encouragement. Okay. So thank you. That's my presentation at this point.
Thank you, Brett. That was really, really helpful for myself. I'm not involved in this type of work, and what a great overview you provided. All right. Well, I'm now gonna introduce Jamie, and Jamie's going to be our second presenter today. A little bit about Jamie. She is an ordained pastor and theologian in residence at Restore Church in Austin, Texas. Also a retired combat medic in the U.S. Army, a mother of 4, and married to Eric Tanner. In 2017, she founded Simple Sparrow, a care farm in Central Texas that teaches all ages, backgrounds, and abilities how to care for land, gardens, and animals with the mission of learn, grow, and heal. She received her master's from Dallas Theological Seminary and returned to complete I'm sorry, Jamie, I don't know what this is, but another degree in her dissertation and research.
Yeah, ministry, yeah.
Gotcha, thank you. Her dissertation and research is a training program development and evaluation of the Simple Sparrow model, which combines spiritual care and trauma-informed care. The goal is to equip and support more care farmers who seek to provide spiritual and/or trauma-informed care for their own organization. At Simple Sparrow Care Farm, Jamie continues to develop and evaluate care farm programs and service outcomes. She also provides pastoral care, and her community enjoys reading outdoors with friends.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this whole journey of Simple Sparrow started about 10 years ago when I convinced my husband to buy me a few acres so I could have a hobby farm. I grew up on farms and ranches in Colorado and Montana. So I was very comfortable with outdoors and animals. My husband is an electrical engineer and worked in Austin and does not like the farm. So I am the full-blown farmer. And we just have just a few acres is what we started on. And my focus was really just a hobby farm and a place where I found a lot of healing. And again, where I just felt I could really flourish in my personal spiritual journey. And so that's kind of where it started for me. Also, we are in Texas now, near Dallas, which is the Bible buckle of the US. So that's another thing culturally that as I've looked and observed and researched care farms, not just in the US, which I really didn't even know any existed until the Care Farming Network. So I'm so glad that this is here now. But years ago, when I started researching the Care Farm model, they're all over Europe. And I don't know if y'all know, but Holland has over 1,200 care farms alone. And so they have been doing research on care farming for decades. And their care farm models started after World War II. You will probably not find many that are trauma informed, and I have yet to find one that has kind of a theological backing with Judeo-Christian philosophies woven in. So that's kind of where I focus Simple Sparrow's model, is how we could look at our culture, also look at what are other care farms doing globally. I had the privilege of speaking at a care farm conference in Australia in 2019. And so that has been kind of my exposure to care farm, was collaborating with care farmers and care farm researchers internationally. So I have a lot of really great resources if anyone needs that. And that's kind of been my passion. So on our website, simplesparrow.farm/research, I try to keep a pretty well updated list. I am working on a dissertation right now, because one of the things lacking globally is even people teaching how to do care farming. And so that's again where my focus is. I'm so glad that Brett covered the trauma-informed stuff so well. We are also trauma-informed, and just like Brett said, that language is used so much in our culture right now. And I really appreciated Brett's breaking that down, like, what does that mean? Organizations, nonprofits, clinicians, clinics, anything with mental health, when they use that language trauma-informed, it's a very general term. And it just means that they are aware that the brain, mind, and body process stress and trauma. There's several different groups and organizations that give certifications for the types of trauma-informed training. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll kind of unpack a little bit of this more with y'all. Here we go. Okay, and hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so this is just a little bit of my background of Simple Sparrow. I'm going to fly through these pretty far, but what I want to kind of draw your attention to, especially those who are looking at starting a care farm, think about what are the needs in your community. Again, our biggest needs in our community were mental health support, but then also being able to provide that spiritual care. And so our founders and leaders reflect that, not only the spiritual need in our community, but also the mental health need as well. We're a very collaborative organization. That's what this next slide kind of unpacks. We do this because it helps us provide better trauma-informed care to the community. And when we partner with other organizations, we can really find those individuals that flourish and thrive with the care farm model, because let's be honest, like, farming isn't for everyone. We implement several evidence-based methods. The examples I give here is TBRI, which stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention. It's a training curriculum that teaches caregivers or professionals how to build trust with someone who has gone through significant trauma. So when Brett shared on certain things that they do at Gould Farms to help their clients, their guests feel safe, that's kind of the heart of TBRI. And then we also utilize the NMT, which stands for the Neurosequential Model of Therapeutics. That is based on Dr. Bruce Perry's work and research from the Child Trauma Academy. And basically what the NMT does is it's a model of how the brain works sequentially. And so when Brett was talking about how trauma is processed in the primitive areas of the brain, he was actually referring to the brainstem and amygdala region, which is that primitive region of the brain. As we become regulated, so as we're able to feel like we can cope, our brain, mind, and body is in a calm and alert state, we can actually come up through the higher functioning regions of the brain to our cortex or our cognitive functioning. So a lot of research when traumatologists are looking at how the brain, mind, and body process stress, that's kind of what they're looking at. And so Bessel van der Kolk, who Brett also mentioned, he wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's explaining how everything that we experience in our whole life comes in through our senses, and it gets processed through our brain, and our experiences will change the shape of our brain and the wiring of our brain. And so if our brain structure is organized a certain way, it's going to impact behavior. And Brett covered that beautifully and very succinctly. So what we look at Simple Sparrow Care Farm is if we understand that people process experiences in life through our senses, the sense of touch, deep touch, light touch, smells, sight, sound, all of these things, they can help regulate or dysregulate someone. If someone is feeling anxious, they are in a state of upregulation. If they're lethargic and depressed, they're more downregulated. And so what we find through our research is that farm nature and nature in general provides a lot of activities where people can regulate themselves, self-regulate. They find an activity that helps match their energy if they're feeling anxious and alert. Maybe they gravitate towards the chickens because they identify with that energy of the chickens and the busyness of the flock. Somebody's feeling more downregulated. They're drawn more towards the rabbits where they can hold, they can get that deep pressure. And so they can regulate themselves better by also having free choice of what farm activity helps them regulate. So that's kind of our big focus here. And we want to teach other people how to do this. So that's why we are an educational nonprofit. We have therapists that come here and utilize the farm for services. And we teach them how to interact with the animals. Our co-founder is a trauma specialist. And so she does that trauma-informed training. And then my role is I actually then teach therapists and families how to engage safely and the best way with the animals and the gardens at the farm for their own healing journey. Here's our big vision here at Simple Sparrow. We provide access and exposure to educational and therapeutic care farming locally. We equip and mobilize care farmers globally. We train professionals and laity in trauma-informed care of self and others, utilizing farm nature, so that people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities are empowered to learn, grow, and heal. I'm going to just blast through this really quick, but this is just for, again, anyone who's starting out. I get a lot of questions from care farmers or social workers, anyone who is interested in starting a farm. How do you even set up an organization in the first place? So this is just an example of how you can organize your chart. And again, be thinking about your city, your town, your community that you need to serve. What are your strengths as a leader? And you need to get people on your board if you're doing a nonprofit or even a for-profit. Get a team of people that are strong where you're weak, and intentionally stock your organization to reflect the community that you're serving. They have a voice in the community. You want those voices at your table. So this organizational chart just kind of shows that. A little bit about us too, and just our growth. In 2022, we served 4,475 unique individuals. That's a huge number. We are not a residential facility. We offer, I guess we would be outpatient clinical services, and that is from the therapists that utilize the farm for services. But we have basically 3 different programs and services that we offer. Our community outreach also often looks like me going out to schools and talking about the brain, mind, and body and how it processes stress and trauma. I travel around with small animals. We have a volunteer team that goes to memory care facilities And we also have a group of neurology students right now from UT, and they're bringing small farm animals to their patients, and they're documenting and observing the quality of life changes in the patients that get to interact with these small farm animals. The other service that we offer are small groups. And so those are usually people coming to the farm for more time, a little bit more one-on-one interactions with the animals. And then finally, we have individual services. So that includes our the therapy services that are offered. We have a couple of talk therapists who are LPCs. We have a rec therapist. We have an occupational therapist, speech therapy, and then I offer pastoral care. And those are those individual. And then also there are times when some can't afford therapy, but they find a lot of therapy healing at the farm. And so we will also provide a volunteer situation or like program for them, so that they still get the benefits of being outdoors, of regulating, but they don't have to pay that price. They can't afford the therapy, or maybe they don't want the therapy, but they still get therapeutic benefits through volunteering. This is just, I'll go through this quick, but I think the need for alternative mental health services is majorly on the rise. And so these numbers that I'm going to go over reflect our community in the Central Texas and Austin area. When we first started out, we were very small. You can see kind of a dip there through the pandemic, but generally our trend has just been exponentially growing. This is the number of individuals served, and I haven't even updated this slide with the 2022 numbers. Here's our volunteer program. You can just see how much it skyrocketed. People are looking to get outdoors. People need to get outside and off of screens. Our programs and services truly invite all ages, backgrounds, and abilities. We have refugee families that come out here with their kids and they can run around. Moms might strap the babies to them. We have foster and adoption families who might have a lot of kids who are neurodivergent, who've had significant childhood trauma, and they don't do well with other situations or environments, but they can come out to the farm and run around and get their energy out and pick grass and feed it to the rabbits. And so our volunteer programs have really just taken off. And then our growth in numbers, we introduced an idea to our community that no one had ever heard about before. And so this is just really encouraging for our board to see, just from our beginning in 2017 until now, just the amount of people we're able to serve and just our growth even through donations. This is just an example of, if you are, again, looking to start a nonprofit, set some goals for yourself, be clear how you're going to achieve those goals and assign who's going to do it. I won't go through all those details, but this is just to show you how a nonprofit works, how it runs, how you can start thinking about your own vision for your farm. All right, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. All right, I'm going to encourage anyone to throw a question into chat while I read some questions that have already been posted. And after we get through the chat, also you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Looks like the first one that came through was from Pauline, which was a question around boundaries, because boundaries are so important. How do you keep boundaries if staff live on the property? And it says the property of both places, but Jamie, you don't have a residential component and Gould Farm does, correct? Brett, did you want to tackle that question then?
Sure, I can just say it's a real challenge. I guess is my first reaction. I think we work really hard to encourage a lot of open conversation with one another about how to show up authentically and show up as yourself, and be in relationship while being clear that I'm here in a particular role. And there's certainly ways that's blurred here a lot because of us living here, because of us participating in community activities, because I live across the road. So there's a lot more access to my life as a treater for my clients than there would be in other settings. So I guess my answer is just lots of conversation and continuing to think about it. And yeah, I think working it out as a group, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you for being candid. And another question, it looks like more for Brett here. This is from Susan. She says, I'm curious about the value and practice of medication used at Gould Farm. I really believe in the healing powers of working the land and baking bread. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, most folks who come here for treatment are on medication. We have 2 consulting psychiatrists who work with us and are here every week meeting with people. Certainly our sort of a principle we're constantly working with is the desire to have folks on the least effective amount of medication as possible. But I think we think about medication as a tool, and the way I tend to think about it and talk with folks about it is that it can be useful in providing a foundation of stability that enables us to then work on skills, work on developing our identities, work on work. But the medication doesn't do it on its own, I guess is how I'd resonate with the question.
Thank you. Karen brings up maybe not a question so much, but saying that she finds individuals with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder love having their hands in the dirt. It's calming for them. We also find that when those individuals are agitated, using a wheelbarrow and shoveling dirt or gravel into the wheelbarrow can really help ground them. I love that this is being used for mental and or behavioral health. It just makes sense. Donna asked whether or not we'll be able to have access to these presentations to watch again. And yes, Donna, after all of our member gatherings, if you give me a day and then go to carefarmingnetwork.org, then the recording is posted. And then we also link, assuming Jamie and Brett, you're okay with us sharing the PowerPoints, we would link to both of those. Let's see, Talon has a question. Is it believed that you should have someone licensed and accredited in trauma informed or in order to start up? Or is this something that someone can go through a Care Farm trauma informed program or training and then get started?
I can start that one.
Thank you, Jamie.
I would say just be careful about where you're getting credentialed with trauma informed, because that has become a very popular word. I recommend the, and I pulled it up, NICABM. They have a lot of excellent resources, and I can put that in the link, but it stands for the National Institute for Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine. They have really great resources from very credible, reputable traumatologists, including Bessel van der Kolk, Pat Ogden, Richard Schwartz, Dan Siegel, Bruce Perry, Peter Levine. These are kind of the big names in the field that have been doing this research a lot. So if you are looking for a certification, I would start there. Oh yeah, thank you, Kate, for putting that up there. Because a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous, right? And so it's better to find something credible. And again, I like the NICABM. Start even with reading Bessel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps the Score. You can start with Dr. Bruce Perry. I don't think it's necessary to have a certified trauma-informed person, but having somebody advising who is in that field will definitely, I think, improve the quality of care and just also help you understand how to organize programs and services. And there are several of those trainings that I could recommend. But yeah, Brett, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, in terms of starting up, I'm not sure I have anything to contribute there. Gould Farm has been here since 1913, so it was a little before I arrived. But I agree with what you're suggesting about accreditation and training.
All right, question for Jamie here from Julie. We started our farm primarily as an LLC, market garden with a social Christian mission. We're finding that a lot of our volunteers are working through mental health issues and benefit from their time on the farm. Could you talk a little more about your pastoral services and volunteer program? What next steps would you recommend if we want to offer more structured therapy?
Yeah, well, Julie, be sure you feel free to also email me. I'll answer these as quickly as possible for the sake of the time here. I would recommend with volunteer services, it's giving people access to the farm. Our philosophy at Simple Sparrow, based in the theology, is really teaching people creation care. We approach it with that view of a belief that there is a good, loving God that created everything. And in a loving relationship with God and one another, our purpose as humans is to steward God's creation. So whether people believe that or not, we approach people with a level of dignity because of our theology view. When it comes to the mental health, we let people believe and think and be who they are and what they are. Our goal is to just teach them how to care for the land, gardens, and animals. The pastoral services that I offer, I consider myself kind of the lowest rung on the ladder of mental health care. And so oftentimes that looks like a family who can't afford therapy services from an LPC, but they need to talk to someone. And so I'm available and I provide just 4 sessions. And oftentimes I recommend to somebody who's in that field, if it is something larger than a spiritual care type of a thing, but that way we can get them the services that they need. And if an LPC isn't available, then I can be available for that. Also with certain type of hospital or hospice facility issues, I can go and be present. I mentioned we go to memory care facilities and Alzheimer's and dementia care places. And so that's another part where my pastoral services are being used in that capacity, and just, again, developing relationships with families. And then the volunteer program, man, I could talk a lot about how we structured that, but basically our staff is here to teach people how to do the farm work. And so we have just ongoing volunteer trainings. A lot of times people just come for one time. We have several that this has been so life-giving for them. They continue to come. And so our staff is first here to train anyone who wants to learn how to care for the land, gardens, and animals. And then they make sure that the land, gardens, and animals actually do get taken care of. So that's kind of the summary of that. And then to become more structured with therapy, I recommend maybe reaching out to local therapy services and organizations. We had a very organic growth here where therapists started reaching out to me because they were hearing from people that we knew mutually how healing and wonderful the farm was. And so I started having therapists call me, and during the pandemic especially, and say, hey, can I meet this client out? They're neurodivergent. We're not doing well with telehealth. Can we come to social distance? And so that's actually where the therapy program really boomed during that time. So, but Julie, feel free I'll share my email, and we can chat more, and I can share more information about that.
I also just, before going back to questions, I want to encourage people to, visit both of your websites, but Simple Sparrow's website has a lot of great research listed on it. So I would encourage you to look at that for one of the neat things that really drew us to you, Jamie. Question here from Matt. Does anyone have a good list of good sensory plants? And feel free also, if you want to take yourself off mute and chime in. So good sensory plants, anyone?
If not, I'm thinking about making one and compiling it, putting it together.
Yeah.
So, by category of, like, you know, texture, smell, sound. Cool.
Love it. I feel like we might be a little stumped here, but Jamie, did you have any ideas?
So our co-founder and OT, her name is Marty Smith. She's very well known in the field of trauma. She was a fellow at the Child Trauma Academy and a TBI practitioner. She does a lot of stuff, but her and I are developing a sensory garden. And we helped establish one at a care farm in Australia. And the sensory garden basically had different, like the lamb's ear is great, but also mint for upregulating, oregano, which is kind of hot. That can be another alerting taste. And you don't want to just think about taste, but also the smell. And like somebody had mentioned the lamb's ear, the texture of that. Roses smell really nice, but they can be very alerting, right? And upregulating. Lavender, it tends to be more calming. To get something like a tea garden is also really beneficial. We have kind of a vision of doing a container tea garden on the back porch someday. But getting chamomile, mint for that, hibiscus, you know, and having this project to do and to taste and smell is so important to, you know, activate all the senses. So
I love it. People are also chiming in on chat. So some really good ideas in there. Let's see, back to questions. Here's one from Paul. He's curious to hear your thoughts on what trauma-informed responses look like in non-clinical settings. Their program focuses on vocational farm education without ministers, psychologists, or other therapists, but that doesn't mean that trauma triggers don't happen on the farm. Brett, Jamie, did either of you want to tackle that?
Sure. I guess what comes to mind for me is the recognition of what's happening for someone. You know, that list of symptoms I talked about, recognizing those things are happening, and so responding to those, whether it's with coaching a skill, whether it's inviting someone to take a break, take a walk, name what's going on for them. Any of those simple things I think are worthwhile.
And I would just say, even by coming into relationship, that is going to be the biggest buffer to trauma. And the relationship, a healthy relationship, is the most important thing for people to heal through trauma. It doesn't matter that you're not a psychologist or a therapist or a minister or a teacher. As long as you are a person willing to love another person and help their flourishing, that relational connection is going to be what gets them through.
Thank you. Any consultation groups or individual services for clinical supervision for trauma-informed care farming that you're aware of?
We're doing that here. We're piloting some programs. That's actually the crux of my doctorate work, is to get something official. I'm currently writing a manuscript on our model. Last year we piloted a few different classes on trauma-informed care farming, and they were geared for professional LPCs and OTs, mostly because they could get continuing education hours for it. We are planning on doing 3 of those classes this year. They're 1 day, they're 9 to 5, but we do cover, it actually is called trauma-informed care farming. So I can give people more information about that. Again, we're still kind of feeling it out and evaluating that program, but we locally, we've gotten a lot of great feedback, and that's also those people that take the class are then eligible to meet their clients here at Simple Sparrow.
Let's see. I'm not seeing any other questions unless I'm missing some in chat, and sorry if I am, please do chime in. I'm going to throw something in the chat there that I just wanted to share, a little maybe off topic here, but this is Somatic Wilderness Therapy Institute in Colorado that does some wilderness therapy training. Very similar to some of the types of things that we've been talking about today. And yeah, some either as a participant or possibly if anyone's looking for somatic training. Well, we have 5 minutes left, but we can all get 5 minutes of our life back if we end early, but I don't want to, I shouldn't say that, I'm sorry. That came off completely wrong. You know, whatever, we can go get a cup of tea. I did want to just let everybody know again, if you didn't hear it before, this is a recorded presentation. It will show up on our website tomorrow, along with some links. Jamie, you put your email in there. Brett, I don't know if you wanted to share your email at all or how people might be able to get in touch with you. But this has been really informative. I know we had a lot of folks asking for exactly this presentation. So I really appreciate both of you taking the time to present and share out that information. Just a reminder to everybody that we have these monthly member gatherings every month, every Thursday, first Thursday of the month. And if you ever have ideas around future topics, or if you have an idea like I want to present on, then feel free to reach out to me at Care Farming Network. You can find me on our website. So big thank you to everybody for taking time out of your day. And yeah, have a great rest of your afternoon. And thanks again, Brett and Jamie.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.